So when we imagine that polar bear, or even the desire to see a photograph of a polar bear, this I could not tell. I couldn't go there and make a photograph of it. Because by doing so, I would be fulfilling that fantasy that we collectively have of this region, and therefore contributing to the misunderstanding of its valuation and its inherent importance. And therefore, I would be making a work that would be a discredit to its actual importance. So when I've always wanted to photograph the Arctic, it's Antarctica, the Arctic. Yeah, you'll notice in the course of the what you've just seen and what you just heard, I've touched on both the immediacy of the surreal. I've tried to touch a little bit on the abstraction of how these things, these issues, move between our understanding of time. And I've also tried to speak to the immediacy of the pain and suffering of those that have been confronted with its brutality. And so the Arctic represents something of the next step, because with this work and the work that I continue to do, it will be much in the vein of all three pieces blended together. And what I mean by that is the Arctic, when you close your eyes and you imagine it, chances are you're going to imagine a polar bear, you're going to imagine some ice, you're going to imagine some snow, and blah, 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 blah. And that is a fantasy. The Arctic is warming, parts of the Arctic are warming 3 times as fast as the rest of the world. Sea ice is melting in record lows and likely to not come back in the coming years. The Arctic is under threat, and it's the canary and the coal mine that signifies that the coal mine is poisoned and we must evacuate. The Arctic is a symbol to us far more than it is a reality to us. So when we imagine that polar bear, or even the desire to see a photograph of a polar bear, this I could not tell. I couldn't go there and make a photograph of it. Because by doing so, I would be fulfilling that fantasy that we collectively have of this region, and therefore contributing to the misunderstanding of its valuation and its inherent importance. And therefore, I would be making a work that would be a discredit to its actual importance. So I decided what I would do is I would photograph the fantasy of the Arctic as the theme itself, whilst at the same time using those symbols to speak to the scale in which we see it. So the first photograph is of an iceberg in northwest Greenland. You're looking at the inside of an iceberg from a very massive glacier in Inuit. And I wanted to evoke the sense of inside out, obviously, but I also wanted to blend the sky and the snow and this like bleeding of light, of almost like you died and went to heaven type aesthetic, with this very raw, eternal, scarred, almost looks like granite. It doesn't look like ice to me. It looks like you rip a bandage off of something too soon, and this is what it looks like. It's unpleasant. You want to put it right back together. So this is kind of really the approach I'm taking with the Arctic, which is under threat. So my subject matter, while familiar, I wanted to subvert it by speaking about it in a different way. So you're looking at this photograph from the Arctic Ocean. So this is record low sea ice melt. The sea ice is melting more and more, and it won't reform into the future because, of course, our planet is warming. So you're seeing the white is snow, the tan is land, the blue is water. And I wanted to use this feeling of like almost looking through like a Petri, like a microscope, looking at this event. Almost like you're studying it in a slide and it's 2150 and you're looking back at like how did human beings not notice this was a really, really shit idea, to make this happen? And I wanted to look almost like you're studying our virus or our viral behavior. And so this is where this blending of black and white and color, but also scale is coming into fore. But I can't quite help myself, and I always like to. I'm a bit of a sucker for this very cinematic feel of taking feelings that I've seen in cinema and translating them into things that I see in other places. And what I mean by that is this atmosphere, this font is from a day that was particularly notable in Svalbard, in the archipelago of Norway and the Arctic Circle, where there was one day it was negative degrees, the next day it was like 15, 16 degrees, and above zero. So it went from ice to melted fog, running water. It felt like I was in a murder mystery. It felt like I was in this like this really, really eerie dream. I wasn't supposed to see the ground. I wasn't supposed to see some of these things. They were supposed to be covered in snow. And the structure that you're looking at is a failed dome that was constructed to be a garden in the Arctic. It's nothing. You can't really grow some of these like flowers or certain types of plants that you would consume. You can't really grow it in the ground there, so you kind of need to have an apparatus to do that. And I like the skeletal nature of this. I like the feeling of that type of structure, very human. The symbolism of it, the desire to cultivate life, and I like seeing that it's been reduced to a skeleton. And you'll notice that this is also a theme within the series, is reduced to something, right? You have the halved iceberg, you have the skeleton of this dome, and then you get this compression, this very large scale, overwhelming the frame of human action. You're looking at a dock, and this dock is like many docks that you'll see across the Arctic. It's in some ways producing shipping. It's a point of commerce for not that area, but for us in other parts of the world. So in this area, they're fishing halibut like crazy, because halibut at the time when I was photographing it was in high demand. So our consumption behavior, our consumption patterns dictate a whole series of outcomes that we never get to see. And for the most part, when we imagine the Arctic, we imagine that polar bear. Don't forget, we imagine that some people even along the way when I was doing this asked me to make some photographs of penguins. And I always like this. I always enjoyed when people asked me to make photographs of an animal that exists in the opposite direction of the Arctic. And it speaks to that fantasy, is what I'm really trying to get at. When we imagine the Arctic, we don't like to imagine that unpleasant dock that exists because we like to eat halibut. We want to imagine that polar bear. The polar bear is not just the symbol of the Arctic. It's a symbol of our willingness to ignore the Arctic. And so that's why I blended this type of aesthetic, this version of the Arctic. So now you're looking at the aftermath, the blood on the sea ice of a seal that's being butchered by Inuit hunters. And I thought this was an important texture to evoke in the viewer's mind. Blood upon water, death, again, the temporal nature of something, the compression, looking at something, its scale, relating and being relative to the photographs that come before and after. In some ways, the Arctic is the more complex version of everything I ever wanted to shoot. And now you're looking at a mine that is far from the prying eyes of the public. And this is why the industry, the mine itself, its lead and zinc, is able to conduct its behavior in this way is because the viewer cannot easily see it in Alaska. You would have to do what I did. You would have to hire a reluctant pilot out of a very specific place to fly over it in order to see it. And that's a part of the way I wanted to approach the subject matter. I wanted to show you some things that you've not seen before, and I wanted to show you some things that you have seen, but not give you the seal. I wanted to show you its blood on the ice. I wanted to show you the texture of staining the land as the idea, and the blood on the ice and the pollution in the mine for me are just as important to consider simultaneously in the forefront of our attention, where things should be in some ways. Like this is where the work really allowed me to expand upon that. I got to play with the relative subject matter and like its importance. Like this is melting permafrost. Permafrost is a whole other issue, and about what risks and dangers come along with it in a changing climate. But I also didn't want to make a story about permafrost. I don't think many people are going to want to open their newspaper in the morning and be like, "Oh, I would love to, read 15 pages long form piece on permafrost." Like, I don't really know if that's the general public's way of interacting with climate change. But if I can evoke the idea of displacement within that very valuable subject to read about, then I can maybe perhaps get that general public to be interested in it and to feel that.
You've had a front seat to these experiences, and I hear your passion. I hear your anger. I hear you're really connected to this. Is there a hope? Do you think there's hope?
Hope for what?
Hope. Is there hope that we become aware of our impacts? Is there hope that something can come out of this? Or is it just so rapidly changing that it's almost like you're on a roller coaster to hell and there's really no way you can get off the track? Do you feel any hope?
Of course. I wouldn't be on this call if I didn't feel that. I wouldn't be on this call if I didn't feel any hope. That's a lot of double negatives to. I like to simply say, yeah, of course there's hope. There's hope every single day, and I want to be very specific. Every contribution a human being makes to improving the lives of their neighbor, family member, loved one, of their immediate environment, to being sustainable, it matters. It's a fiction. Don't ever believe. It's a fiction to believe that it doesn't matter. And the only system of thought that wants to promote in our daily lives that our choices don't matter, the only system of thought that wants to do that is capitalism. Because capitalism wants you to keep on behaving unsustainably. Its only purpose is growth. It has no other end goal. And it cannot be justified. We live on a finite planet with finite resources. That is the only place we can survive. And we are making massively poor decisions collectively towards its well-being. And by doing so, not without irony, we are poisoning our ability to survive. That is an existentialist question rather than a question of like preference. Anyone that doesn't believe in climate change, they will fall into the footholes of the footnotes of history as being those people. The real future, the potential of our solving this issue comes from every single human being that holds a candle against the darkness of those ideas. And that's the conviction I have, even while being angry, even while being hopeful. Being angry and hopeful are for me not opposite. I can be angry at something that I don't like and be hopeful and purposeful with what I do about it. And so long as I view that, what I do contributes, that it is a candle for not only myself to understand my existence and the time I live in, but others to feel and connect to that, that I am doing something with my time on this world that contributes to carrying that flame forward. And I touched on this a little bit, but I do believe whether or not I get further support for this work, whether someone buys prints and helps me make it, whether or not someone gives me an assignment or no one cares about it at all, will make zero difference if I don't care about it. So I try my very best to persevere. I try my very best to believe and do what I say. And I hope that when somebody feels that they are on the roller coaster to hell and they feel that things are bad and they feel like, what hope is there? I would say, cry me a river. And when you're done, look around and think about how you could help somebody that isn't you. And that's the source of joy. It's a source of happiness. That's a source of beauty. That's the source of meaning. I promise you the best things in photography and life come from discovering that it's not about you. And if we could have those two ideas, that's what I'll leave on. If you have two ideas to have, is that by honest reflection, what your contribution is to the world and how you can make that better. And then when you do so, remember, it's important to think about other people. And if you can help somebody today, that's the actual hope. That's the difference. You helped someone that wasn't helped yesterday, you just made a huge difference. And that person will have the capacity to do that again, and again. It is only because we think by consuming materials and consuming objects that we are absolved of that responsibility. Are we in this situation at all?